Welcome back again, Dank Podstash homies. Episode 83 is coming at you right after I remind you that the Dank Podstash is officially sponsored by Project Sparta. It's time to get hashtag Boogaloo ready and in fighting shape. Greg Papanicholas is going to get you there with personalized meal plans, training, group support, and tons of amazing fitness and motivational resources and knowledge, including the Project Sparta Facebook group. You can go to projectspartacoaching.com and learn more about Greg's work and get started on your path to health. Don't be that person that only sits and talks about change, whether it's your health or even the Boogaloo. Get up, start learning, drilling, and training. One of the most important parts of prepping, no matter what for, is your physical health. Get to Project Sparta Coaching now and get after it. You can find those links in the description. We also have a special offer for our listeners from friend of the show, author and content creator Shane Radliff of Liberty Under Attack Publications. You can take 10% off your order by using coupon code DANK10. Just go to libertyunderattack.com. They have books focusing on self-liberation, freedom strategies, solutions, and more. Current books include, but are not limited to, Hashtag Agora, Second Realm Book on Strategy, Ben Stone's Sedition, Subversion, and Sabotage, and Shane's very own Vanu, A Strategy for Self-Liberation. They also offer assistance to new authors throughout the publishing process, including editing, proofreading, formatting for Kindle and paperback, and full-service audiobook production. That's Liberty Under Attack Publications. Share your story, find your freedom. Special shout out to Voluntary Apothecary. Voluntary Apothecary was kind enough to send me a sample care package full of awesome beard care products, including beard oil, mustache wax, combs, and more. You can check out their amazing products at tashtamer.com and voluntарyapothecary.com. Be sure to check the episode description for those links and a link to the Voluntary Apothecary raffle. Get your free beard care goodies. The Dank Podstash is also now teaming up with Road to Anarchy for a monthly newsletter and more. Road to Anarchy is an online magazine connecting groups of voluntary individuals who are looking to increase their freedom from the state. Becoming more self-reliant and developing a better focus on becoming a productive individual is the only mission. The only division is against the state. No matter your flavor of anarchy, finding your road to anarchy is the first step to progress. The time is now to put our individual differences aside, join up, and create change. You can go to roadtoanarchy.com to sign up for the monthly zine or to patreon.com/thedankpodstash and get signed up with any tier of support. Check out the Road to Anarchy Facebook page and group to connect with other individuals on the road to anarchy. Where's your road taking you? One more shout out to Anarchy Radio. Join Anarcho DJ Phoenix for Friday night super jams. All music, all night, starting at 5 p.m. Central Standard Time. Saturday morning interviews start at 10:30 a.m. Central Standard Time, and news and opinions start Mondays at 5:30 p.m. Central Time. You can find Anarchy Radio live on the Float app, and if you're a Dank Podstash patron, you can catch my Saturday morning Anarchy Radio interview on the Dank Podstash Patreon page. Now, sink your teeth into a juicy interview with the one and only Christopher Ledbetter.
Enemy of the state.
An enemy of the state.
Enemy of the state.
Dank Podstash.
You're listening to Enemy of the State's Dank Podstash. Check out thedankpodstash.com to find every episode of the Dank Podstash, links to support the show via our BitBacker and Patreon, Dank Podstash merchandise, and much more. If you'd like to advertise on the Dank Podstash, email us at dankpodstash@gmail.com. Back again for another episode of Enemy of the State's Dank Podstash, and we got Christopher Ledbetter here. Christopher's come on the Hot Tokes before with me and Daniel Johnson, and we're looking to do a full episode for you all today. So how you been, man? A little more excitement and nonsense going on since the last time we talked, huh?
I guess, as always. Yeah, just making it, just surviving. So
Good. For anyone who missed the Hot Tokes, that was pretty much immediately after the incident with the McLeod Police Department there in Oklahoma, right? You want to give a short recap of the things that went down that night?
Yeah, just basically for anybody that didn't hear about that, that's where they, came in. McLeod police, one of them that moved in with his girlfriend there, he came in, stopped my sister who lives there out of jurisdiction in a police vehicle, out of uniform, and was saying he was the chief of police, all these other felonies for a civilian, and basically put the lights on. My parents came down the road, started talking to him, asked him what the problem was. He started screaming at them, telling him he was in charge and that they were suspicious. They called me. I showed up with my rifle there because they told me somebody was bothering him, and he called in off dispatch on personal cell phone his police buddies. Then they called other people on radios, and that's why it wasn't an actual raid, but like they were still walking through the woods, like they didn't have the SWAT teams out. The other ones didn't know about it. But yeah, it ended up with like 10 vehicles at least staged on the outside of the roads. There was like 15 of them there at the end from different agencies that were walking through the roads. But yeah, and they stood down to us. We called in more people with weapons, and that was about it on that. They fired that guy, or he's on paid vacation still. And I also figured out from my buddy who knows somebody that's in the Oklahoma Highway Patrol that they were actually using it as a training incident already. And they admitted in the training that he did call on a personal cell phone, basically a mob hit out of jurisdiction. So that was that.
Yeah, cops being corrupt as usual, and it's just, obviously it gets more real when it happens to you and your family. Most people just hear about it through stuff like this or news articles and whatnot. So, but I'm not. Did that spark like a change in your usual routine, or were you ready and training and stuff long before that?
It was say I was doing this stuff like shortly after, like short bio of me. I was overseas as a civilian volunteer with the Kurds after I got out of the military. Didn't want nothing to do with the military anymore. Went over there, unpaid volunteer to help them. Got back, and I was still, going through college and all that. I was like, oh, I can still get back into the government and all this and help change. And, figured out it was all horrible from the base concept of it was terrorism, So it's like, I can't support this, you can't do any good with that until you become a civilian. And so got out of all of that. This was like before the Boogaloo meme pages were even a thing still, I think.
Sure.
And I started looking for people to shoot with, people to train with, stuff like that, more and more. Started getting into like looking for people that were doing peaceful protests, rallies, anything. And that continued for like another year, 2 years. And I started getting more people, and a lot of, either ex-military or civilians that were just good guys that were against this and wanted to protect each other in their areas. And that was shortly before this happened. Yeah. And then after that, obviously, more videos came out, more of the proof come out. Then more of the people who were actually dedicated enough about it to meet in person and do things, start preparing, started coming out. Because the more that they see, somebody is able to do this and survive, they have some level of success, they start coming up. And then the people who are like, oh, well, you were wrong in the first place without any evidence, they just shut up and continue doing what they're doing type of deal, just nothing type of deal.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's really awesome that you were able to get a group of guys that you trust together to train and to do all that and stuff. I think that seems to be one of the hardest things for a lot of people. That's the thing I see in Boogaloo groups or, regular chats with anarchists, anything like that. It's hard to find groups of like-minded people that you can trust to do this stuff with, to share the same goals and stuff, because a lot of us are really spread out, across the country or hours away from in different states and whatnot. What can you give nothing, no deep information, obviously, but kind of what were you looking for when you were finding like-minded people?
Just basically, and I agree, it is very hard. Like I said, it took me a long time. I was doing it more and more, but it's continued. But basically just the same people that you talk to in the groups and all of this that are like on for liberty and all this. You see that their, concept state of mind is just violence against peaceful freedom is wrong, 100%. That's all it is. You know, they make it more complicated than it is, but it's really all simple. It's overcomplicated for a reason. Then you find those people because there's so many of those, but it's like I talk to a lot of them, and it's like, have you ever tried to meet anybody in person or anything? And they're like, oh, no, or we'll try to sometime maybe, or I got to do this or that, or they're like, mostly it's too dangerous.
Mm-hmm.
And then for that, I tell them, it's already dangerous already. This is already unsecure what you're talking on, even if it's in crypto, and they've proven that if you're trying to do anything, even just speaking the wrong think, basically, they will kill you over that while you're not even fighting back with other people. So there's always a risk to meeting people in person, but that's why you have people that you have together, and then you meet the next ones in public areas
Mm-hmm.
or in areas that have already been disclosed, and then you move on with them from there, type of deal.
Right. That's an excellent observation. That's what I was going to ask next, because, yeah, there's a whole lot of paranoia when it comes to, meeting people that you don't already know to get together and train, plan, whatever. And that's the biggest hang up that people are trying to get over, is that paranoia of, like, are they feds? Are they cops? Are people going to come after us for meeting up? Are they going to leak information they shouldn't leak? So, yeah, that's good. You just got to take that risk, because that seems to be a thing that a lot of people, from whether it's Boogaloo activities, training, or even just when it comes down to not paying taxes, anything that goes hand in hand with not supporting the government, there's always an excuse not to take the risks, because, you might get hurt. And that's something that's been weighing heavy on my mind for quite a while, is, when are people going to take risks? When am I going to take even more risks other than what I'm taking now? Like, what's the line? What's that final straw? And are people going to be willing to take those risks and protect themselves, or do they want to try to fly under the radar? And with being individuals, everybody's individuals, I think it's somewhere else. But that big question of where the line is, when will we be so uncomfortable that people really push back, is another thing too.
Yep, exactly. Basically what it is say, there is the fear, that horrifying fear that people have of even doing anything that's legal that proves you as a threat now. That's obvious, like, solid evidence of tyranny.
Mm-hmm.
What I tell people too. So, I mean, yes, you should be afraid. We're all afraid. And that's the evidence that, we should do something. We shouldn't have to live our lives in fear like that. That's why it's like this. But it also goes along with the thing that they're always, like, posting all this about fighting back against the government. It's like, well, that's also a part of fighting. There is no guaranteed safety. This stage that we're in right now, I try to tell people, it takes far more courage to do things like this than it does going into with an actual team into combat, because you only have so many variables there. You've already got a team that's with you. You already know what side they're on. You're already doing, and they'll call you a hero or whatever if you get wounded or killed or whatever. This, you have a million more fears of the unknown, which is the only real fear, And then you got to worry, it's mostly peer pressure on top of the fear of the punishment.
Mm-hmm.
What is everybody else going to think of me? Or I have to try to get along with all these people instead of just standing for the concepts of liberty and, telling them my reasons for that, but being firm on that line, But at this point, the biggest thing that I tell people to get them out of that is, like I said, they will kill you for anything now,
right,
anyways. And that's been proven. People think it'll never happen to them, but it's like a car wreck or anything else. It's just like everybody who's been in a genocide never thought it was going to happen to them the day before. So it's not happening, then it's happening.
right.
Then you're the YouTube video or the statistic. So at this point, it's actually less safe for people to not start standing up. You actually have a lower life expectancy by supporting these things without preparing at this point. So it's not even safer. It's just people still feel they're safer because we're raised in it. We grew up like this. It's actually the mind working against your own in one of those things. You're actually less safe at this point.
Sure.
So morally and you know, tactically it doesn't make sense anymore.
Those are really good points, and that's something that I'd never thought about because I don't have any, you know, I was never in the military or anything like that. That's really interesting that, you know, there's more variables to cause fear in the situation that we're in now as opposed to going into combat. That's really interesting. I have to talk with some veteran buddies about that and explore that a little more. So you've been doing kind of First and Second Amendment audit kind of deals, right? Or is it something else? I've been watching your videos. Is that what you'd call it, going over to Kansas and whatnot?
Yeah, and that's just basically stuff that we do, you know, because we only have a limited amount of time to train. Even once you get into small areas, because you have to get everything decentralized so that everybody's in their own area with each other, able to get to each other, you know, in a fast time rate. But basically in between our training and stuff, if we see anything that comes off as, hey, these people are threatening people, anything like this, or anything we can do in our local areas spread out, you know, we go to it. Like the thing before the Kansas, I took, you know, about a fire team or so up to Guthrie because they threatened, they made a huge Facebook post about it and were adamant that they would use force on anyone for not wearing a cloth mask, but that they couldn't wear a medical mask either. So they were like telling them both these at the same time. And so we went up there, and with the first person we saw on the street, if you watch the other video where we talked to the actual local guy, who was a bartender there, a bouncer, and he's like, yeah, I have to. He's like, they bother me hardcore, and that's why we went up there and told them. Of course, they never do anything to even one person, usually armed very well, but it's like, we know you're doing, we saw this is what you're doing, so we're watching you, like, do this to innocent people who are just trying to be left alone some more,
right?
And we will come back still. So it's just the best peaceful thing that we can do without knowing all of the variables there, type of deal.
Right. And
but it is dangerous. It can be not
sure.
peaceful in a second.
Yeah. Well, and the reason I like watching your videos as opposed to some of the other ones, you guys look more professional, I guess I'd call it, more grounded. It's not a whole lot of nonsense on the kit. I've been really hating the Hawaiian shirts lately, just because of stuff that I've seen.
It's become a thing of just
yeah, just stuff I've seen about how, you know, the way people are acting when they're wearing them. The meme is becoming real life in a lot of cases when they're out there doing that, and it's not good optics. At the last Duncan Limp protest, it was, I don't know, some of those videos were interesting. We talked about that on the
hard
last.
to watch.
Yeah, it is. And we talked about that on the last podcast with Andrew Cosgrove a bit. I did get some information wrong. I guess the guys who were arrested at the end of that were not with the protest group, but they were driving around and they were holding, I think, an AR out the window and just acting completely foolish. But even the video, yeah. Did you get to watch the video of the guys who were there, I believe, from the Allegheny Rescue Company page?
Yes. I saw those. I didn't see any video of the actual arrest on the guy or them holding weapons out windows or anything.
Right. Yeah, and I think that was a separate group, but that didn't have anything to do with the main protest group, because I think some of the Big Igloo Boys page admins, or at least one of them, were there as well. And that Oldman over there is really well grounded and smart about how he does stuff. But yeah, what did you think of that latest Duncan Limp protest where they decided that they were going to go in unarmed, which I realized was the family's wishes, was to keep it peaceful, but that doesn't sit well with me in those cases.
Yeah, basically I knew of, like, I talked to that Allegheny guy. I think he added me after seeing a few of my videos and everything. Like, I don't know them personally. A lot of these people I try to meet personally if it's anybody I talk to, but there's another guy on the East Coast, not any of them that I know, that messaged me, said, are you going to this? And I was like, oh yeah, I wish. I'm like, I'm still at work. If I started driving now, I wouldn't even make it, you know, type of deal. But he was like, so what do you recommend doing and everything? And him and the Allegheny guy also asked. And I told them, I was like, so you're going, you know, just keep with a team of guys, you know, remain, keep an area of your surroundings and plan it out, and, you know, have plans with different vehicles stacked up, all of that, to be able to get out if you have to, all of that. Because when they know ahead of time that you're coming, they set it up like a combat outpost. They got
Sure.
snipers on roofs and stuff like that, armored vehicles. But I told them, and they were saying, oh yeah, well, weapons aren't allowed. And I was like, wait, when did that happen? They just decree this?
Mm-hmm.
They're like, yeah, pretty much, so we're just going to leave them. And I was like, please don't do that.
Right.
I'm like, I'm telling you exactly what's going to happen if you do that. Because I told them, I said, people are going to get taken. If you go and do that, people are going to get taken. You would be better off just speaking about it if you're just going to go to speak about it anyway without the ability, any deterrence. Because I told them they already threatened to arrest people and give them up to a year in prison
Right.
for just showing up,
Right.
not even having a weapon. So it makes no sense. Why are you going to show up when they threaten you to arrest you, but then not keep your weapon because they threatened to arrest at the same time? They were calling a bluff.
Mm-hmm.
Because, like I tell everybody, they're human beings too. They're not any great. We look at them as just. That's why everybody gets so scared of them. I do too, because I've lived my whole life like that. Even though I know they're just a human being, they're afraid of dying too, just like me or you.
Sure.
They're not superhuman. You know, they're just other human beings. And yeah, it happened exactly what I told them was going to happen.
Yep. Yeah, it's pretty wild. I don't like, associating. It's kind of hard to associate the Duncan Limp protests with, like, say, the Virginia rally or some of the other rallies that people have been having, because there's the element of Duncan's family having certain wishes around his memory and his name if they're going to be involved with it. But Virginia and other ones, a lot of people are calling them the Boogaloo because it's compliance and, with not bringing weapons or not having illegal, quote unquote, weapons and, things like that. Not actually a whole lot of action other than walking around with loudspeakers and stuff. And that doesn't seem to be making much or having much of an effect, because Northam in Virginia, pushed through his gun laws and restrictions that he wants to push through, despite however many thousands of people showed up. I think that what's going on in Texas with the hair salon owner is good, that they have armed support outside the salon to keep the cops away and let her business continue running. I think that's a good way to do it, because you're actually stopping something, not going out and complying. That seems to be one of the biggest differences, is not offering that compliance that they're trying to force you to have.
Well, it's, they say the definition of insanity is doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result, right?
Mm-hmm.
If you're going to something, if you're against these things, where the whole point in the first place was they kill somebody for sleeping in their bed because they said something that they didn't like or were just a threat to them possibly in the future, then it makes no sense, because you're saying, well, we're not going to do anything different other than that, and then expect, I wouldn't want people to do that if I was killed either. It's kind of they on the loudspeaker saying thank you very much
Right
to the police officers and stuff while they're telling that. Yeah, it was hard to see. It's like, I don't hate those people,
sure,
but I try to help them, because there's a difference between those that'll do that, they're still on your side, but then the ones who will actually talk down on you for making a stand.
mm-hmm.
Like how they say the most cowardly type of slave is the one who talks down on the other slave for ever trying to be free. And then they call you the violent one for just trying to make a stand and defend the violence on you. They are actually helping the enemy more than, and that's why, but they won't have a chance of getting killed probably. They'll definitely leave them alive.
Mm-hmm.
But that's the whole point. It's just a selfish thing.
Well, and the division is, the Boogaloo community seemed to be pretty tight near the beginning, and the division is working from all the media reports of, you're all far right, and then, a whole lot of Trump Boogaloo stuff coming about, which is really annoying. And
I saw a lot of that in Kansas.
It's just crazy. And, there's anarchists are pretty underrepresented as a whole, I think, in the community. I don't think we are the majority by any means. I think it's mostly, conservatives, maybe small government kind of people. So that's another major hang-up, because then everybody starts arguing about their different philosophies and how things should be. And it's like, this is counterproductive to working together and then coming out the other side, if there is another side, and doing what you want and leaving each other alone. And that was one thing I wanted to ask, going back to you building your group, is how do you guys deal, do you even bring up different philosophies, political philosophies that you hold, or do you just stick to training?
Of course, because it's basically, you don't want to waste your time on somebody who's not going to actually fight for those principles. So it has to build up from there. But you're right with the whole thing where everybody's divided, because not more so that they don't agree as much, I don't think. It's because they're divided out of fear of just doing what they're told. Because when I ask people, when I'm going and looking for people, I ask them two things. I ask them, do you believe that any amount of forced taxation is ever justifiable?
Mm-hmm.
And if they say yes, I'm like, I'm sorry, I can't work with somebody who believes in slavery.
That's good.
And then I say, are you willing to fight to protect 100% of peaceful freedoms? Even if it's a freedom you don't use, if it's peaceful, are you willing to fight to protect it? And that's as simple as it gets, because there's so many people I've talked to that are like, it's the words that they're afraid of too. Because there's so many people I've talked to that they're like, no, I would never be an anarchist, or I would never do this, or I would never do that. But at the same time, they agree that taxation is theft. You can't force something out of someone and it ever be not evil from the beginning, because it's still the definition of slavery. If they control 1% of you, you're still 100% a slave, because if you don't give that 1%, they can kill you over it.
Right.
And then they can use that 1% to buy men and guns and raise it to 2% anytime they want.
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah.
And a lot of them, they actually agree with that, but they say, I would never be a voluntarist. I would never be an anarchist. And I'm like, but you're redefining words to fit your opinion just because they told you. I'm like, you actually are. You're just saying you're not, type of deal. So.
Yeah, it's pretty wild, the aversion just to that word anarchist. I'm surprised that people are, even averted to voluntarists, because it sounds much more peaceful. There's not as large of a history of different anarchist philosophies and violence and whatnot behind it. That's interesting. But those are great questions, good and simple, to the main point too. Defending peaceful freedoms and not condoning slavery. That's perfect. I did want to ask too, before that too, I guess with the group, obviously it's good to have secure comms in your small groups and whatnot, but we know through not just the different protests that happen, but the different situations, say Whiskey Warrior, your situation, Duncan Limps, that it's really hard for the community at large to have good communications right now on a large scale. I think it's probably easier to have good comms with your group, but that's one thing we're definitely missing, is all of our different groups being able to communicate and let everyone else know where you need to be, what's going down in the situation. Mostly people don't even know what's going on after someone says they're being red flagged, or even if they are being red flagged, it's wild. What are your thoughts on overall communication, if there's any improvement that we could enact?
Overall on that, you're right, because if it's just a person that you don't know and they're just saying, I'm getting raided, and you can't get out video, or something, because you're actually being raided,
Mm-hmm.
that you got the people who are like, why aren't we getting video right now? It's like, because I'm getting raided.
Yeah.
That goes along with the whole thing of also being more public past the point, because operational security has its place in actual operations. We are not in a combat revolutionary war or anything yet. There is no real operations unless you're talking about like going and you know, peacefully defying some of that stuff, like some of the stuff we do, we don't let them know we're coming,
Mm-hmm.
you know, type of deal. Then we'll put out a message beforehand so that people know the situation, know the area, all of that, in case it became violent.
Right.
So, but if you're just a person that's worried about getting raided and not even being able to communicate, yeah, you have to have smaller networks to verify it, to get that information out with you. Because if you don't go public at all, like I always tell people, at this point, it's more dangerous, because then you're that one guy that they just kill off and they call you a pedophile thug,
Mm-hmm.
with no evidence, and everyone believes it.
Right.
You know. So
Yeah.
other than that, you can use crypto stuff. Nothing's safe. In person is always the best that you can get, but you have to go public at some point. You know, you can get like the Baofeng radios and all of that. You can technically download crypto into them, but then you can't speak to other people without them.
Mm.
But yeah, other than that, just the credibility, it has to be decentralized. You know,
Right.
a few people in every small town across the country can't be beat.
Right.
5 huge cities can be.
And that's a good point too. That this is different from, you know, the communications going into an actual, you know, war zone combat situation, because we're not there yet. This is borrowed time that we can be using to improve this stuff. So excellent points on that. I did want to ask if whatever you're willing to reveal as far as training, because there's a lot of guys out here who, like I said, myself, don't have former military experience, anything like that. I wanted to kind of get into the nuts and bolts, physical training, what you recommend, that kind of stuff.
Okay. Yeah. No, great. Because like you were saying, a lot of my guys look really professional, right?
Mm-hmm.
None of those guys you saw in that were military.
Nice.
Prior military. You know, we've had a few people in with us, but it's the same thing that like the SF does or whatever. It's like force multiplication. You go in and you train people who are willing, because you can't train character.
Right.
No matter what, you cannot train somebody. Like, that's why there's people in special operations and stuff that are still like cowards. You can't train that.
Sure.
But if you get people that are willing to learn, you can do anything. They can teach themselves anything. Like, and a lot of that I tell people too. Like, I learned a lot more using my freedom as a free person than I did in the military. You know, everybody's like I get a lot of the people that are like, I'm against the government, but I want to join the military. And I'm like,
right.
No, not unless you believe in slavery for everybody else, and, you know, thank us for our service for being forced to pay you. But I was like, that's the wrong reasons to join anyway. At least some of the people who were still in the matrix, so to say, believe they were actually fighting for freedom to do that.
Sure.
I was like, you're going to be disappointed either way, though. If you're just doing it for training, or you really think that it's fighting for freedom, you're going to get a harsh wake-up call either way. Most of it is basic training, and the rest is just torturing you, you know?
Right.
So I learned a lot more when I went overseas as a civilian, you know, like humanitarian aid volunteer. I learned about way more weapon systems that I wanted to teach myself, way more tactics, all of this on top of the basic stuff, just because I wanted to learn in my own time as a civilian, you know, with all of that, and then just put it into application, and it works, type of deal.
Nice.
But as far as the physical part, like, you have to do that more like one-on-one if you don't have enough time. Because, like, say if you get 1 day a week to train with larger groups, you almost have to have them, which is what they do a lot. They go and train in their smaller areas with each other, or just physically train themselves. And then some of the training is pretty physical in itself.
Sure. And I saw your post the other day, the rules for Zombieland. I guess the first one, improvisation,
Yeah.
second, cardio. Big time cardio, huh?
I used to love lifting weights a lot, actually. The gym's been closed for a long. I'm a little Somali and skinny right now, probably, but
it's killing me. It's
yeah,
killing me too.
anything you can do, like anything you can do to stay active. But as far as like combat fitness, it is more a lot of endurance. You have to be able to carry weight for your size of body, because if you are going to be on the ground, which is inevitable at some point, without vehicles, you're going to have to carry pack, everything you got on you, you know, your extra ammo, your water, your weapons, all of that.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be able to, you know, hike miles and miles every day, you know, or just basic simple stuff that's not like extreme level athlete stuff, but it's just a lot of endurance type
Sure.
of manual labor, really.
Right. And that's cool. Yeah, that's good. Because that's pretty much what I figured, you know, building a pack and with armor and whatever, it's a lot of stuff that you're going to carry. And I'm lucky enough to have hills and ravines and whatnot around me. So I always have the, my 1-day pack with me when I take the dogs out, or even hiking up and down some elevation the last couple days trying to fix this fucking well pump that's gone bad on me. I throw the pack on up and down the hill, getting tools and all that. So good stuff for sure. I wanted real quick to circle back to what you said about guys wanting to join the military for the training. I got a guy named Bailey, young guy named Bailey, that I wanted to shout out right now, who hopefully will be listening to this episode, who's considering joining the military for just that reason, for training, among other things. And I was hoping you could give him a message of maybe why he shouldn't do that.
Yeah, Bailey, it's hard. It's hard because you're told from a kid even that this is what you have to do to be a man. And it couldn't be more wrong. And you figure that out with the majority of them when you get in there. Just doing it for those reasons too, you're never going to end up with what you really want. And you can't just leave, you know, you're basically a slave once you're in for the next 4 years. But I can, you know, tell you, send you videos, everything, pictures about what took me so long to realize after I went over as civilian. We were fighting people that were using lots of U.S. weaponry. They supply other terrorists, and then the other terrorist groups after the other ones start winning, and they kill the civilians in between. And then you're just there for the in-between parts, you know, type to go get the bad guy, and then they're getting the other bad guy. They keep propping them up. So you really, it's impossible to fight for freedom, of course, on that line, that level. But as far as the training goes, you can, like I said, these guys that I'm training, they're all civilians. If you have the willpower, you can get in a lot more if you use your time than you will get, you know, with years in the military.
Mm-hmm.
And be very, very combat effective. There was guys that were volunteers, civilian volunteers in Syria, never in the military. We trained them up with the other guys and everything. And some of them were straight up like warriors. And these guys were good medics. They saved a lot of innocent civilians' lives. Never did any government service. Just used their freedom to do that, you know? So it is what it is these days.
That's excellent points. And that, what you said at the end of there, using your freedom. Because, you know, there's a lot of people right now talking about rights. You know, we have to protect our constitutional rights and whatnot. And I saw an interesting meme that I had to post on the podcast page today. That was, you know, you don't have rights. You have permissions that are controlled by fucking pedophiles in government right now. You have your freedom, and you can choose to use that or not. And I think that's an important distinction that people need to realize, especially right now.
Yes, exactly. The whole power of the king lies in the belief of the king.
Mm-hmm.
We have so many. There's so many numbers. I think, what is there enough registered hunters like in Texas alone to equal all the standing militaries on Earth? Like, I'm not a registered hunter or anything even. So none of the guys I know are registered hunters even. So if anybody even just peacefully stood up and said, no, I'm not doing this anymore, and I will defend myself with violence if you come try to use it on me for this, it'd be over immediately. It could be over like that. But if you look at all of human history, the majority of people will still put fear over what is right, even if that fear is not backed up.
Right.
You know? So it's obviously probably going to come to violence again, as it always is through human history. But even with that few percentage, you're still going to outnumber them greatly. Mm-hmm. So.
Well, and that's another thing too. I think it is going to come to violence as well. I don't buy anybody saying that, you know, we're going to bring the Boogaloo to them. We're going to bring the Civil War to them. That's never going to fucking happen. I think in history, different Boogaloos, whether you consider Vietnam or like you were saying overseas with your civilian endeavors over there, even the American Revolution, it's always been the tyrants bringing the violence to them at some point when they're ready to stand up, whatever. I'm pretty suspicious of people, having calls to action out there saying, why don't you go kick it off? I don't think that's the way it's going to be. I think the people who want to remain peaceful are right in that it needs to be a cultural shift, a shift in mindsets, philosophy, whatnot for lasting change. But I think it falls short when they condemn any violence, defensive or not, because it comes down to that.
Yeah.
And you got to be ready for that. It's I think the saying, it's better to be a warrior in a garden than a gardener in a war.
Yep, exactly. Know yourself and know your enemies, the art of war. But yeah, you're exactly right on that. Like, because of the public perception, it usually will always come to something really horrible happening. And then they're like, oh, and it's like, yes, this is what was happening to individuals this whole time. And they're taking this power and putting the iron fist down now because they're getting afraid, and they're also realizing that it's come to that exponential point, the fall of an empire type around this time period. But yeah, and then the people usually are like, why don't you go out and do all of this to somebody? That's usually the people, they're begging others to do something for them when they're not willing to do anything. So it makes no sense. Yeah. And the same thing for the people who are trying to project their fears onto others of never doing anything, or like, hey, if you stand up for yourself, you are a terrorist, and you're wanting violence. You wanted this to happen to you. It's like, no, that both of those are cognitive dissonance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I like the sentiment in a lot of the graphics and whatnot that are put out there having to do with Boogaloo or whatever. The sentiment that we just wanted to be left alone. I think that's something to hold on to and run with, because that's pretty much what everybody wants, unless you're, a psychotic, sociopathic, whatever piece of shit that wants to exert your will on other people. You just want to be left alone to live your life. And the thing about that is like, just like what you said, you have to be willing to defend that want to be left alone. Saying no and defending it, that's the thing. Going out there and just saying no and then walking away when when the cops tell you got to leave, or they're going to go in and ticket that business or whatever, that's where it falls apart.
Yeah, exactly. It's either, at that point, you only have two options. They haven't given you any more. There's either, surrender completely, or you have to resist and you don't know what's going to happen. And that comes with the fears of the unknown. But like I tell people, how many more fears of the unknown do you have nowadays when you surrender?
Right.
Or even the last 100 years, if we want to look at it,
if you surrender,
because people think this is a new thing as well.
Sure. If you surrender, you're completely at their mercy. Like, I don't know. It seems like it would be less scary to go out resisting than it would be to get dragged off to wherever they're going to take you and do who knows what to you along the way. And once you're there, because you see it all the time. If you've even resisted a little bit, if someone resists a little bit, they get their ass beat all the way to the jail. They get their ass beat, while they're getting interviewed and whatnot. Body cams happen to be malfunctioning at the time, all that stuff. You're going to get fucked up one way or another. Yeah. You got to pick where you want to resist and what you want to happen to you at that point.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's going to be scary either way. But yeah, for the people that haven't thought that far ahead, yeah, when you realize that they're going to do what they're going to do after you've already surrendered anyway, and they're still doing stuff that's wrong, and they didn't take your surrender as like, oh, okay, now we're going to treat you nice. No.
Right.
Then what do? Oh, you're going to fight with your hands, type of deal. Yeah, that's a lot scarier when you're surrounded, when you're thrown in a cage, when you're handcuffed with people with guns on you and you don't have a gun, and you don't know if they're going to, like, I don't tell too many people about it because they don't really believe me, but before me and the guys that I was with overseas as volunteers left too, we were put in a prison there. That was it was like a U.S. backed, U.S. built prison where they like tortured kids and stuff.
Oh, shit.
Because we gave it away our weapons to the militias we were with, and we went back to the airports, and this other party was there that worked with the U.S. They didn't like us. They didn't like us because we helped another political party of their same people, and they threw us in their prison. And me and another American actually, they threw us in prison with ISIS fighters, you know, in the cells with them. And we thought we were going to die trying to stand up to them the first night because there was just not that many of us. And we actually tried to escape the place. Like I broke out of the freaking iron bars, pulled them out of the guards while they were locking them back up, and ran out of there. You know, we were sort of outside. They have machine gun nests and everything, and we were barefoot running out, just trying to escape to a phone or the U.S. consulate that was like a block down the road.
Sure.
That wouldn't even get up to come. And yeah, they just beat the hell out of us. We almost got out the front door, and then they just started stomping us with like 15 people, me and my other little buddy that was with the medical unit, you know. And
fuck.
Yeah, so that's 10 times scarier thinking that you're going to be stabbed to death or shanked to death by them or their guys in their cells. And it's the same back here. People don't realize how bad U.S. prison systems are either.
Right.
They are horrible, you know, so...
Yeah, that's wild, man. If you want to, I'd love to hear more about what you did over there independent of the military. I think you've posted some footage of, I don't remember, was it PKK ambushes and stuff like that? And I didn't know that you had gone over there.
Yeah, I posted them for the guys to show them about close combat stuff.
Yeah, that video was fucking wild. Like, that's some scary shit. But, yeah, I hadn't heard about. They have a ton of those, actually.
So.
Oh yeah, I hadn't heard about your independent work over there. What made you decide to do that independent of the military?
Basically, I remember I was in the military from 2011 to 2015, and they deployed me in 2013 off of like ships, and we just went around all these different countries, you know, training with their locals. And all the stuff, you know, basically the world police thing where you always got to have a whole amphibious readiness group, you know, marine expeditionary group rotating both sides of the world at all times, you know, even when they're not fighting. And while that was happening, there was like genocides going on of these people that we said we were trying to help and all this. And I was like, wow, you know, and they just evacuated the area, let them kill all the women and children, take sex slaves.
Fuck.
And at that time, I was just like, well, this is not, you know, I thought I was going to try to actually help people, not just support power for money or something, you know, and I was just still slowly realizing that. But I saw these people over there volunteering with them, you know, back in the early days. And I made the decision when I got out to just talk to some of them over there and just buy a plane ticket over. And so that's how it went. Like most of the guys came in by themselves, just buying a plane ticket because we were like, hey, we don't care about the politics. We don't care about none of that. We just agree that these people are being slaughtered by foreign invaders, and we just want to go help the civilians. So we hopped on a plane and, you know, basically got to any of the units that were there fighting against them. They, you know, sent us to, like, I was in Iraq for quite most of my time and around the Sinjar area. So it was where they took all of the sex slaves from, you know, and the major genocide was there. And basically I was working with them, helping train their, you know, their younger people and everybody around there. And they had like a military camp, and I was like helping train them, go out with them. And then we crossed over into Syria, and they had like a medical unit there and everything. And they sent us to this little thing where they teach you Kurdish more and all of that. And you go out and you actually operate just with them. And they were paid. They were unpaid too. All of their fighters were not a military. They were unpaid, and the communities voluntarily paid them. That's why they call it the YPG or whatever. It's like Yekanea Palestina Gel. It just means People's Protection Units.
Shit.
People that volunteered to protect people there, basically.
Right. That's like
some
their
of,
Boogaloo.
some of them are like the commie types, and then some of them on the far east in their parties are like more like super authoritarian, but like everybody says, where they're all, no, most of them are just regular people, as with everywhere. Like the people that are in the extreme parties, they're the ones running the prisons, torturing children and stuff. You know, it's like, it's the same thing back here. Most people are just peaceful and want to live.
Mm-hmm. That's really interesting that it's voluntarily funded by the communities, but it makes sense if you're sacrificing your time and energy and possibly even your life, that people would be appreciative enough to support you if you're protecting them, you know, sacrificing that stuff for them. Yeah. It's their own Boogaloo, you know, from, you know, whatever village to village, area to area. I can imagine it's fucking probably really sucks.
Yeah, exactly. Because it's like a third of the forces were women fighters too, you know, so they had women mixed in with the men's units in their own units. But yeah, it's a little different when you're getting actually invaded too. Right. Instead of invading other people, you know, you kind of have to make your own people to protect themselves, because you're getting overrun and slaughtered just for trying to live.
Now, what would happen when you came across U.S. forces, or did you ever come across active U.S. military during that time?
There was a few of them there, but not many. Like, it was only like special operations dudes, and they were always far in the rear. Like, they were there just to support their proxies, basically, whoever's the proxy at the time. So, like, I wasn't in the Battle of Manbij or anything. I was mostly just in trench fighting and stuff around the, like, mountainous area. But that was one of the bloodiest battles that one of my buddies there was in. And they made the documentary called The Volunteers. It's on YouTube now.
Nice.
That kind of goes over the medical unit of volunteers. They were just there to, like, provide medical aid to everyone. But yeah, basically when they were there, they even the medical units, they got some of their stuff donated to them by the U.S. Special Forces, because even though they got in trouble for it, because they weren't even allowed to use it, type of deal. They weren't close enough to even use any of it. So the only U.S. forces I ever actually saw were like Black Hawk helicopters going over really close to like positions. Okay. And that's about it.
Well, that makes sense from what you were saying. If the U.S. military is there protecting their resources, you know, being world police and stuff, and not actually at the points where people actually need help, that you wouldn't see many. Yeah. So that's cool. That
usually if it's a just fight or something, you won't see them there. Yeah.
Right. It's cool that they.
It's bad, but yeah.
It's cool they took the risk of getting in trouble to donate some of that medical stuff, though. That's a good thing to do.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're still good guys. Like some of them stuck in it, but they, you know, hating their lives and stuff, you know, type of deal. Because that's not what a lot of them wanted to do either, type of deal.
Sure.
So, like,
yeah.
I'm sorry, buddy. You got to use your freedom too at some point.
What a fucking mess over there. There's listen to a lot of former military who've been over there, and I know some personally, and it's the thing that a lot of people ask is, you know, why don't we just get out of there? Why don't we just pull out? And a lot of people's response is that, you know, it would just be chaos and there would be more genocide and things would never work themselves out. And it's kind of a manufactured mess. Well, it is a manufactured mess, obviously. If they're funding one terrorist group after another, they don't ever want to get out of there. They're protecting their interests there. So who the fuck knows how to untie that?
Perfect scenario for perpetual war, because you look at jihadists are bad people, right?
Right.
They're just another, you know, they're another authoritarian government, but they have Sunnis and Shias, kind of like Democrats and Republicans. They almost believe in the exact same concepts in a way. They just fight for power.
Sure. Yeah.
So you fund one of those. That's been going on all the way since Reagan, you know, type of deal. And then, but it's different when you're actually seeing it and seeing, you know, these guys with U.S. weapons that you're fighting with Russian weapons, like really good stuff with night vision, with sniper rifles.
Fuck.
Like, so, like, yeah. And then all the civilians in the middle, if they're a Sunni or a Shia, they'll get killed by the other ones coming through.
Sure.
So you know, Soleimani, for example.
Mm-hmm.
That guy, we were allied with him the whole time I was over there as a volunteer in 2016. So we actually got Iranian-backed Hashd al-Shabi PMU militias attached to us by the coalition, even though we didn't want them. And they were wearing all black, long beards, long hair.
Wow.
Didn't speak any Kurdish. We went up to them and said, or, you know, do you know, talk to them in Kurdish? And they're like, no, I only speak Arabic and English. And it was really creepy because they're dressed in all black. They look exactly like ISIS, you know?
Right.
And then it was like, are you Hashd al-Shabi? And they're like, yes. And they put up the one finger.
Fucking A, man.
The U.S. attached them because we were working with Soleimani then, you know?
Fuck. Yeah, that's fucking wild. It's just, it's so much tangled shit going on.
It's back and forth so much.
Yeah, fucking A. Well, shit, man. We're about at the end of the recording time I have. You have anything else you want to get out there before we call it a show? And then also, I'm hoping you can stick around for a quick 5-minute video. I got a couple more questions for you for my patrons, the people who support the show.
Oh, heck yeah. No problem at all.
Sweet.
But, yeah, just for anybody wanting to get out there to train, to try to stand up for your liberty and actually take liberty back instead of just surrendering it slower, it has to start somewhere with a small step. You have to go out, find other people. It's going to be dangerous, but it's less dangerous than all of that. And then you don't have to live your life knowing that your children are just going to grow up worse slaves. So it's the far better of the options at this point. So everybody try to do the best you can.
Absolutely. All right, man. Thank you very much for coming on. That was just as awesome as I expected it to be. That was really good. And thanks everybody for listening. Remember, total freedom, no exceptions. Enemy of the State's Dank Podstash is sponsored by Project Sparta. Go to projectspartacoaching.com to learn more.
Zombie presidents, what anarchy! Zombie presidents! Zombie presidents!